Debbie is the former Executive Vice President of Mobility and Customer Service at AT&T. She retired last year after nearly 34 years at AT&T. Within her last role, she oversaw customer care for all of AT&T's mobility customers and managed $1.5 billion operating budget and delivered more than $1.6 billion in total revenue. So very, very impressive. Debbie's also the author of Don't Downsize Your Dreams, Leadership Inspiration for Women, a book that emphasizes having the courage and passion to achieve your vision for success. So please join me in welcoming Debbie and thanking her for these closing remarks.
Thank you. All right, it is so great to be here with all of you this afternoon, and I know the provost started this morning by saying you all are the smart ones. Well, you guys who stayed through the end of the day are the really smart ones. And so I really appreciate all of you who are still here and have listened to the great advice today. As I was flying in, I live in St. Petersburg, Florida now, and as I was flying in yesterday, I was reflecting back on the times early in my career when I had the opportunity, when I was 21, 22, 23 years old, when I had the opportunity to attend conferences like this one. And I was thinking about all of the times I sat in that audience and had the opportunity to hear from great speakers like the amazing speakers that you all have had the opportunity to hear from today. And I would listen to them. You know, I was just starting my career, and I would listen to them, and they would inspire me and make me dream. And I'd listen to the stories of their tips and their insights and their stories of their success, and I would leave those sessions with my batteries completely recharged. I'd be driving home, and I would be daring to imagine all the possibilities that existed for me as I thought about the rest of my career. And so that's really our hope for you all, and my personal hope for you is that at the end of all of this fabulous day of hearing from great speakers, that you all leave with your batteries recharged and that you're just daring to imagine all the possibilities that await you as you start your careers in corporate America or in your own companies and businesses. So I hope that we achieve this. And it's such an honor for me to have the opportunity to share with you all some of my insights and the keys, what I see as the keys to my success over a 34-year career. I watched some of you, as Kyla said, that I just retired last year after almost 34 years with AT&T, and you guys are looking at each other and going, I can't even imagine living that long, let alone working for the same company for that long. But I can tell you I was so fortunate to start long ago, 33 and a half years ago, as a clerk in a customer service department for a printing company that was eventually bought by Bell South. Bell South was eventually bought by AT&T. So I have 33 and a half years with AT&T by virtue of having survived 2 corporate acquisitions, which is not an easy thing to do, and I don't take that lightly. I was very blessed to have about 19 different roles in those 34 years with AT&T. So AT&T is that kind of company where you can start in one place, in one company, in one job, and you can feel like you had multiple careers over the length of your tenure with a company. So I feel very blessed. One of the things I talk about is my definition of a mentor, and the way I think about a mentor is someone whose hindsight can become your foresight. When I was starting my career, when I was 22, 23 years old, I didn't know the right things to do. I'd sit in an audience like this and I'd hear people give tips and wisdom, but I didn't know the right things to do. I did a lot of the right things by accident, and I did a lot of the wrong things by accident. But after 34 years, I can look back and I can very clearly see the things that worked and the things that didn't work. And so I'm really passionate about helping to lay the stepping stones for you all so that you can find more of those stepping stones the first time and not splash around in the water in between as I did during a lot of my career. So what I want to share with you all today is my journey. As I started as a clerk in a customer service department, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that and what I see in hindsight were the keys to particularly my early success. And then when I want to stop and I want to think about and tell you about advice I would now give to my 22-year-old self with what I know now. Does that sound good? All right, so here's how I got here. When I look back across my career and I think about how I started out as a clerk and then how I evolved over time to be at one of the highest levels of AT&T, there are 4 things that I did early on that were clearly drivers of my success. Number 1, I made great coffee. Number 2, I took risks and I failed, by the way, in very public ways. Number 3, I got in over my head. And number 4, I just set boundaries for life and work. right? Now, does that sound like conventional wisdom or tips or insight? Probably not, but I'm going to tell you how each of these things played out in my career. So the real story is made great coffee. So I graduated from the University of Georgia with a degree in psychology and a minor in criminal justice. I had wanted to go to law school until I did an internship in the Clark County Probation Office and decided that my career path was going to be different from what I originally intended. So when it was time for me to go to work, I did, after I graduated, I did not know, we've talked about this, Nina, I didn't know the company I wanted to work for, the industry I wanted to work in. My path was going to be different from what I had envisioned it all along. And so I started interviewing with a variety of different companies, a variety of different industries. And what I was really looking for is that I was shopping for a boss and a culture. Right? Some of you ask questions about what if I don't like the company. So that's what I was looking for. I did a lot of interviewing where leaders said, you're overqualified for this, right? I had worked through a restaurant business, a restaurant corporation, while I was going to school, and I was ultimately the vice president of a restaurant corporation, vice president and general manager. Well, people would look at my resume and say, you want to start in an entry-level position, you're overqualified for that. That was not what I wanted to hear. What I was looking for is a boss who would allow me to start at the ground floor of a corporation, because I wanted to learn from the ground level up. I didn't want to bluff my way into a management position. I really wanted to have an opportunity to learn how things worked. And so what I wanted was a boss who would say, if you demonstrate potential, if you work hard, I will absolutely give you the opportunity to advance. So I found Paul Hollinger at Stevens Graphics, the printing company, and I went to work for Paul. So I'm so excited, college graduate, first day in corporate America, and I show up on the job just ready to get started. I was their customer service clerk. And I sit down and I meet with Paul and I say, I'm ready, let's go, what's my job? And he goes, well, we've never actually had a clerk in customer service, so I'm not really clear on what the work will be, but why don't you start by making coffee? And so I had one of those moments where I'm like, I went to school for this, right? And what have I done? And, one of those sort of, oh darn moments. But I sat there with a smile frozen on my face, and I finally thought, if my job is making great coffee, I'm going to make the best coffee anybody has ever made. I didn't know how to make coffee. I didn't drink coffee. I didn't know the apparatus required to make coffee, but I didn't tell him that, right? I was like, you got it, I'm going to make coffee. I went to J.C. Penney's, and I asked a very nice sales clerk, can you tell me what it takes to make coffee, and can you give me a little instruction on how to work the thing? And I went back to the office and set all that up, and every morning I came in and made great coffee. But I didn't stop there. Paul still didn't know what my job was going to be. And you've heard lots of the speakers say today, when your job isn't defined, find ways to add value, right? So I decided I was going to take the luxury of this time, where I didn't have a defined role, to get to know people and learn the business. How many people have the opportunity to do that? So I thought, while I'm making coffee every day, I'm going to make a cup, I'm going to pick somebody different every day, I'm going to deliver their coffee, and who could refuse to have a conversation with me when I'm delivering their morning coffee? And I sat down and got to know people. And I asked them questions like, what was your career path? How did you get here? What is your role within the business? What do you do and who do you interact with across the business? And then I would ask them things like, if you were president of this company for a day, what would you change? Right? How powerful those responses were, and how much I was able to learn about people and the business and the interactions between departments. And it wasn't long before I was delivering coffee in the morning, and I'd sit down with Bob and I'd say, Bob, you create this report every day and it has this data set on it, but I sat with Mary yesterday, and Mary's pulling a similar report, has a lot of the same data on it. Do you think you guys could get together and use one set of data rather than both of you having to pull the data at the same time every morning? And do you think there's a possibility to combine those two reports? So I started finding ways to add incremental value, and then coming up with ideas about how to make work more efficient. And it wasn't long before people, I never stopped making coffee, right? That was my job. I never shirked the bad part of the job. I kept making that coffee. But I was finding ways to add value. And pretty soon I got a reputation for being the go-to guy. I got a reputation for no matter what anybody gave to me, I was going to do it, I was going to nail it, do it with a great attitude, and do it better than anybody else. And so 6 months after I joined the company as a clerk, I was promoted to a customer service rep. And 6 months after that, I was promoted again, and that was the beginning of a trajectory that I will always say had so much to do with my making great coffee. The second thing I did, took risks and failed. So there was a point at which, as I was being promoted pretty quickly early on, I found myself at the leadership table, so at the president's table. And I had been in the job less than 30 days, and he said, we've got our annual business plan presentations coming up, and I'd like you to now, and I had stepped into this big job, much of a whole set of responsibilities that I had never managed before. But he said, I'd like you to present your 3-year business plan for your new organization. And that presentation will take place in 30 days. Right, so I'm less than 30 days in, and I now have to create this presentation that delivers our 3-year business plan. Well, I was so youthful and exuberant and excited about the role that I had that I did not hesitate for a minute. I jumped right in. I had so much in my head about what I knew about the business and what I wanted to fix and change and drive and all the things I had seen from the lower level positions I'd been in. So I went right to work creating this great PowerPoint presentation. I had never created a PowerPoint presentation before, but that didn't deter me at all because I had so much up here I wanted to get out on paper. So I start this PowerPoint presentation, and it's amazing. I've got slides and slides and slides, and each one of them is filled with like 4 and 5 graphs of data, right? And on top of that, paragraphs of words, right? I thought it was awesome. I mean, and it had so much information, it would have made Tolstoy proud. So I couldn't wait to the day that it was time to go deliver that presentation. And I thought, people are just going to be so impressed. So the president starts out, and we are addressing the entire organization, so hundreds of people across the entire company. And the president starts out and does his part, 15 minutes or so. And our CFO gets up and does the financials, and I had all of operations, so it was my turn. I got up, and I start going through my presentation. And I am covering everything on every slide so diligently because I had so much I wanted to explain to people. And I'm watching the clock in the back of the room, and about 5 minutes in, I come to the horrifying realization that I'm 5 minutes into a 15-minute presentation. I'm on slide 3. I've got 48 slides, and there's no possible way that I can get through this. So I'm like, this is okay, because I can talk really fast, right? So I start talking faster and faster, right? Because that's really going to help a lot. And then as I realize I'm still not making enough progress, not only am I talking fast, I'm talking loud. So now I'm just, talking loud and fast. So I look down in the front row to my boss, the president of the company, and I look for a little encouragement, right? He's not making eye contact. He's like, will not look at me. So in fact, I look at the entire leadership team in the front row, and every one of them is now fidgeting, looking down, looking around. I'm like, this is not a good sign, but it's okay because I've got friends in the audience. I look out at some of my friends. Nobody is making eye contact with me. It was horrible. It was horrifying. It still makes my stomach turn thinking about it. So there was nothing I could do. I wasn't even experienced enough to sort of hit the highlights. All I knew is all the data I had put on these pages. So I got through as much as I could, and I watched the clock. I went a few minutes over, and then I went, there's so much that I would love to share with you. They all can see that I've got, like 35 slides left to cover. There's so much more I'd like to share with you, but I'm out of time, and so if any of you would like to come hear more about it, just come see me. It was horrible. I slunk off the stage. It was miserable. So that's a very public failure. And one of the things I think women do much more than men is that when you have a failure like that, you start replaying the tape in your head. And you feel worse and worse as you go along, right? I made it through the rest of the meeting without throwing up. But I left, I went back to my office, I went home that night, and all I was doing was replaying that tape and making myself feel worse and worse. And I finally, that night, before I went to sleep, I went, I am not going to do this. First of all, I'm not going to let this define me. I'm not going to let this be the way people remember me. And I'm not going to keep replaying the tape. I need to fix this. So I set up a meeting with my boss as soon as I came into the office the next morning because I wanted to get to him before he got to me. And I went and sat down with him and I said, I just want you to know that I fully understand that I failed. I know that I let you down. You put me into this position, and now there are probably a lot of people questioning whether you promoted me too quickly. And so I know that this reflects on your reputation as well as my own. And I just want you to know I'm going to fix this. I'm going to enroll in a public speaking course, and I'm going to become proficient in delivering a presentation. So I did. I mean, he didn't say much, but he said, good, you need to fix it. So I did. I enrolled in one of those horrific, you all have been through some of these. I think you get much more training on this in school now than we ever did when I was growing up, but where you have to watch yourself, videotaped, and you have to see that. And so it was a terrifying experience. But I learned, and I learned about how to create a PowerPoint with fewer words rather than more words. And I learned that nobody ever knows what you don't say. They only remember what you say well. So I fixed it. And a couple months later, there was another opportunity to deliver a presentation to the entire company. And I went to my boss and sat down with him and I said, I don't know who you have planned to do that presentation, but I'd like to do it. And he's looking at me like, he's like I'm crazy, and he didn't even know what to say. And I said, I want you to trust me on this. I have a reputation to redeem, and it includes your reputation as well. And I want you to trust me and give me the opportunity to start all over again more intelligently. And I did. He said yes, and I did that presentation and I nailed it. But it's a great example of failing. You're going to fail, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But when you fail, because you will, we all do and we all will, as long as you own it immediately, fix it, and learn from it, move on, you will never be defined by that failure. You will be defined by how you recover and learn and do better the next time. So got in over my head. So there was a point at which I had been running the customer service department for a couple of years for the company. And the president of the company came to me and he said, I've got an opportunity for you. I'd like you to take over the sales organization. Well, the sales, again, I'm in my 20s, and the printing industry was completely male-dominated, so there were no other females even in management. And the sales organization consisted of a group of men, each of whom had been selling printing for at least 30 years. I mean, it's what they had done their entire life. So they're crusty, mature men. And they had been my partners all along, right, at customer service, support, sales, so I certainly knew them and had a great reputation with them, but I was thinking in my head, I'm not qualified for this. I have never led a sales organization. I certainly haven't even been in sales here, and so I'm not ready. I'm not qualified for this. But I knew, I was smart enough to know that that couldn't be my initial reaction to him, so I smiled in my frozen smile, and I just told him, let me give it some thought, which, by the way, a man would never say. And I went out to my office and I called one of my mentors. I said, I have a huge problem I need your help with. And he's like, what have you done now? And I said, now, the president has asked me to take over the sales organization and I need you to help me figure out how to say no. And he said, why would you say no? And I said, because I'm not ready, I'm not qualified, I haven't had the experience, I don't know how, what if I fail? And he said, do you think the president's asking you to take over sales because you're an expert in sales? And I said, no, he knows I haven't been in sales. And he said, he's asking you to take over that organization because of your leadership skills and the fact that everything you take on turns out better than when you took it on. You are ready for this. You have the skills to do this. And he said, and I have your back. Those are the things you need to hear when it's time to get in over your head. I took over that sales organization. In another conversation, I would tell you some of the tips about taking on a new organization. I didn't go in saying, hey, I'm the new guy and here's what we're going to do. I went in saying, hey, I'm the new guy and you need to teach me. It was a fantastic growth opportunity. Some of the speakers today have talked about growth and comfort do not peacefully coexist. It was definitely out of my comfort zone and definitely a huge growth opportunity. And I wouldn't have had many of the opportunities I had later in my career had I not said yes to that one. The last one. Set boundaries for work and life. So I was a single mom and during most of my career from the time that my son was 5 years old. And I was advancing quickly in the organization and I had some travel, so I was always struggling to balance work and life and get it all done. And I was at the president's table and we were a 24 hours, 7 days a week manufacturing operation. And every day before the leadership team, myself included, before we went home, the president had a meeting at 4 o'clock. He called us all together because we needed to debrief on what had the day look like, what do the second and third shifts look like, and do we have everything under control. So every day that meeting would start at 4 o'clock, and every day at 5 o'clock it was supposed to be over, but nobody else in the room actually cared whether that meeting ended or not. Because I was the only female at the table, single mom. those were the days when, this is really true, this used to happen, men actually liked staying at the office when the day was over because they could read the paper and talk and stuff because they didn't want to get home till dinner was on the table. That was what you were supposed to do. So nobody else in the room cared that the meeting would go on and on. I had to pick up my son from daycare, and the daycare in those days closed at 6 o'clock. That was a hard stop. And I knew I had to leave by a little after 5:30 to get my son from daycare. So every day at 5 o'clock, when I realized yet another meeting is going to go on and on, I'd start to squirm and think about my options, right? There were no, cell phones, so I couldn't text under the table and get, to ask for help, phone a friend. So I had to sit there and think, do I get up now and go make a phone call and see if I can find someone to pick up my son? Or do I sit here as long as I can and then have to dash out and, explain to everybody what happened? Or do I sit here and then maybe the meeting ends at 5:30 and I can make it and pick my son up on time? And that was, grueling. Every day I sat there with a pit in my stomach. And so far too many days I got to the daycare center when the daycare owner, was sitting on the front steps with my son as the last person there. And I finally said, this isn't tenable. I can't manage this, and it's not good for me, and it's not good for him. So I set a meeting with my boss. And I thought through very carefully what I was going to say to him because, as Lauren said, you don't go present problems, you present solutions. So I went to meet with him, and I explained my situation. First of all, men in those days weren't even very aware that women had children that they had to go pick up from daycare. So number one was just an awareness of my situation. But I said to him, I have worked hard my entire career. You know that I'm always willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. I'm always willing to stay late. I'm always willing to come in on a second or third shift or on the weekends. But this uncertainty every day is something that's not manageable for me, and it's not good for my son. So what I'd like to ask you is, give me advance notice. If the meeting is going to run long, just let me know so I can make a phone call before that meeting starts, and I don't have to run out and be the obviously different person in the room. And I said, I'm willing to stay every single day late that you need me to stay, and the trade-off I'd like to ask for is my weekends I need to dedicate to my son. So when there is work to be done on the weekends, I'll stay during the week, but ask someone else to come in and do the weekend duty. And he said, absolutely. The behavior changed, starting the very next day. The meeting wasn't always at a natural end at 5 o'clock, but he always drew it to a close. He was respectful of the time he had set for the meeting. And if the conversation was still taking place, he would say, let's just adjourn to anybody who wants to continue talking about this, come to my office. It would allow me a graceful exit. So it's a great example of going to your boss and setting boundaries, but offering solutions, not just a problem, and solutions that worked for everybody. I think it changed not just my boss's behavior, but I think the rest of the men around the table probably got the idea of why we were ending the meeting at 5 o'clock, because I was the one rushing by all their offices to get out every afternoon, and I think it began to change their awareness and their behavior as well. So an important part of setting boundaries for work life that you can never forget is you have to earn it. You don't start a job and sit down with your boss and say, hey, here's the trade-offs we're going to make. You earn a reputation for being a go-to guy, for being willing to do whatever's asked of you. That earns you the right. It earns you degrees of freedom is the way I always think about that, right? It earns you the right to ask. So when I think about my early career, I think I would not have had the opportunities that I had had I not done some of those things early on. And now I want to just spend a few minutes talking about the advice I would give now to my 22-year-old self. Number one, networking is not a dirty word. I think you all may be more attuned to the value and understanding the value of networking than I was when I was coming up in the business. But I thought I had a horrific view of networking. I thought it meant you had to schmooze, you had to be disingenuous, I had to go knock on doors. It was almost like cold calling. I naturally formed very strong networks over my working career, and I would not, most of the time when I got a new job, I got a call from someone in my network who said, I've got a job open, and I know what you deliver, and I want you to come take it. That's how powerful a network is. Men tend to have better and more powerful networks than women do. Women's networks tend to be bigger. We have more people in our network, but men on average have networks that are 3 levels higher. Men seek out people as their mentors and sponsors and champions who can help them, who can open doors for them, who are in positions of power that they can learn from. Women tend to seek out people in their network that they feel comfortable with, that they can commiserate with, that they can share all of their frustrations with. Those are not the people who can help open doors for you when you need the doors opened. So this is the number one thing I tell people. Nobody makes it in any company alone. You are only as valuable as your network for two reasons. One, you need to be only a few calls away from an answer to anything at any point. And so you need to have people in your network who will answer the phone when you call and who have a variety of different perspectives and information. But number two, you need those people who will open doors for you and who have your back, so that when you need the confidence to go take a big opportunity, you know somebody of power is saying to you, I got you covered, right? Be authentic. You've heard conversation about this today too. The real you is always better than the fake you. I'm going to tell you a quick story about an AT&T female executive that I saw this play out very clearly. So she was very talented, she's still there at AT&T. Rose quickly through the ranks. She did a variety of roles in finance and in strategy and in operations, and she was just amazing. She was a quirky individual, quirky looking even. So she wasn't, if I put a lineup up here of, high-ranking professionals in a major Fortune 6 corporation, you would not pick her as one of those. I mean, she just had a very unique look. She didn't dress all that pretty. She was just quirky. She was just herself. But in every role that she had, she was so authentic and relatable, and anytime she stood up in front of an audience, she could draw them in, and people would follow her anywhere. But as she was rising rapidly, she finally found herself at a very high level within AT&T, and one of only 2 females at that level across the entire organization. And I and others watched her so clearly change, because she at that point felt, there's a mold I have to fit into, right? We're up here at the top now. It's not like I can't be as quirky as I was. I have to be more buttoned up. I have to be more professional. When I speak, I just can't speak from the heart. I'm going to have notes and be more polished. So we all watched her change her style and lose her audience and lose her effectiveness. And what was more dramatic is that the more she changed and tried to fit into this mold that she thought she needed to be, the more she lost confidence. She would actually stand in the front of the room, and you would see her eventually, over time, you'd see her shaking. And she was never like that in any of the positions that she had. And I'll never know exactly what the catalyst was, whether someone talked to her and coached her, or whether she just realized she wasn't very effective, or maybe she just got tired of wearing the mask. But she one day took that mask off and went back to being who she was, and it was a dramatic transformation. And she is one of the best examples. I've seen this over and over and over throughout my career. When you stand in front of the room or sit at a conference table and you think you're trying to be someone else, you're trying to meet everybody else's expectations, you're less confident, you're more nervous, and you're less effective. I've done it myself. I've made that mistake late in my career, making a presentation to an esteemed group. The real you is always going to be better than the fake you, so don't ever try to abandon who you are. Do you have to have executive presence? Yes. That doesn't mean don't be authentic. Do you have to be relatable to the people you're talking to? Yes. So you can't stand up, being, what your appearance can't be so distracting that people don't hear the message. But other than that, it's always best to be you. Prepare to fail. We talked a little bit about this in my career, but failure it's not a life sentence, and that's the way we tend to look at it. If I fail, if I step into something I'm not comfortable with, if I can't do this, if they see that I'm not capable, that's a life sentence. It never is. You just own it and you move on. It's a life lesson, not a life sentence. Part of our fear of failure, I think, for women, women have a much greater tendency toward perfectionism than men do. And all of you guys are going, no, not me, but yes, you are. Like, how many of you, we never think 80% is good enough, right? Everything we do, we want to do it to 100%, including being qualified for a job. We have to stop thinking that way. Perfectionism is a confidence killer. Every time you think that it has to be 100%, and it's not, I'm only at 80 or 90%, you're killing your own confidence. don't do it. 80% most of the time is good enough. But know that stay grounded in what your value is. Every one of you knows. Like if I could meet with every one of you individually, you tell me exactly what you're passionate about, what you think you deliver to a project, to a team, to the work that you're doing. Have the confidence that what you deliver is good enough, and then on top of that, you're going to be learning all of the time. Shape up your ask. So many times I have had women come to me, so I've selected someone for a promotion in my organization, and I've had another woman come to me and say, why didn't you consider me for that promotion? I would say, because I had no idea you were interested in a role like that. You never told me that that's something that you'd like to do. It happens all the time. Managers can't read minds, and we need to be willing to ask for what we want. Ask for the big assignments. Tell people what we want to do. Think back to your network. You need to be able to articulate to people in your network what your long-term goal is, because that's the only way that they can begin to think through, how can I help her make the next step, and the next step, and the next step to get to her long-term career goals. And don't shy away from the big assignments. That's, as soon as a guy hears about a big assignment, if he's 10% ready, he raises his hand, he says, how high, how far, when do I start? Let's go, I'm on this. And a woman always says, what if I'm not sure I'm qualified for that. If you have the right network, you have the right grounding in what your value is, take on those big assignments and show people what you can do. And then finding your center of gravity. So we've talked a lot about this today, but you have to be true to your own priorities. And Molly, the exercise we started with this morning was a great exercise. Successful leaders, when you interview successful leaders, almost all of them say that they spend some time in self-reflection, in thinking, sitting down and saying, what are the things that are most important to me? Is that where I'm spending my time? And how can I adjust to dedicate more of my time and energy to the things that are important? If you try to be all things to all people, spread yourself too thin. Again, women try to do that, right? We're always the ones that our plate is full, but somebody else needs help and says, help me. We go, okay, I can take that on too. And there's a job that's not getting done, and you go, okay, I can take that on too. If you spread yourself too thin, you end up doing nothing well. So stay grounded and focused on the things that are most important. Let others help. This is a whole session on itself, but be thinking now. Drew's investment session, financial advice session was really great. One of the things that I would say is that you need to start thinking about investing in so that you can afford the care necessary to help you in whatever your work and life looks like as you go forward. Because it's an investment that's worthwhile. When you get help, whether it's from family, friends, or paid help, it is a big part of allowing you to balance work and life. And then the way I always think about this is you're juggling a lot of balls all of the time. Some of those balls are rubber. If you drop those balls, they will bounce. You can pick them up again later, someone else will pick them up, but they keep bouncing. Some of those balls are crystal balls, and when you drop those, they shatter, and you never get those back. So think about your life in terms of the crystal balls. Don't drop those balls. Let other people pick up the rubber balls as they're bouncing, because those aren't fatal, but don't drop the crystal balls. A couple more thoughts I just wanted to close with. This is something that I find as at AT&T, when new people enter the workforce, there's a lot of impatience about it's a ladder, and so when is my next step and when is my next promotion? And they think about it as going straight up. A career is not a ladder, and in fact it shouldn't be. And I've interviewed so many and talked to so many successful leaders, and I say, what would you have done differently early in your career? And they have often said, I would have spent more time at a lower level doing lateral jobs, moving across the lattice, so I had a broader base of knowledge when I got to this level. So don't underestimate the value of moving through that lattice. Sometimes you have to take a step back to find your path to advancement. Don't ever think that's failure. That's really strategic and smart, and in the long run can really pay off. Follow your passion. We've talked about this today too. I think sometimes of work, I see so many people get into a role, get into a department or an organization, and to me it's like they've stepped on a moving sidewalk, right? When you go through the airport and there's a long moving sidewalk, and it's like they're on the moving sidewalk and there's no place, they don't step off, right? It just moves them along and they're just moving with it. I think you have to step off periodically and say, is this path that I'm on, is this thing that it has me moving along with it, is it something I'm passionate about? Is it getting me where I want to be long term? And if it's not, don't just quit, but think about, where you want to focus your energies, because I can tell you my 82,000 hour career, 33 and a half years, I don't know if the 82,000 hours that Molly talked about works for me, but I loved every minute of it. There were very few times that I woke up on a Monday morning and said, I hate going to work. I loved what I did because I was doing work that I was passionate about. And when you love the things that you do, work and life are integrated today. Work doesn't feel like work. It feels like a part of the entire package of what you're doing in your life to make a difference. So let me close by talking about something we haven't spent a lot of time talking about today, and that is, as women, we need to be all in this together. There is one woman alone has a very hard time making a difference and making changes. And one of the things that I think needs to happen in corporate America is that we need more women at the top who can have an effect on changing policies and making company policies more family-friendly, right? Men sort of understand that concept, but when leadership teams are all men, it's not going to happen. We need more women in positions of leadership who can drive those kinds of policy changes that are going to allow women to stay in the workforce long term. And there is such great evidence about the impact of women in the workforce. There's so much of it, and I just picked this one. Companies with sustained representation of at least 3 women, so it takes critical mass, not 1, not 2, but 3 women, and this happens to be relative to board of directors. So women on board, with 3 women on boards versus those with no female directors. Look at those numbers. If you were a CEO, what's the question? We need more women on boards, right? So it's irrefutable, and sometimes I see, I think women have a tendency to compete with each other, and I want us to change the way we think about that. At AT&T, my officer team, my colleagues, were probably 70% male and 30% female. But the females, we had a connection and a network. We called it the Go Girl Network. And this is really true. So we're officers we've made it to the top levels of this company. But when any one of us got the call and said, we need you to come take on this big assignment or this job, they'd call the Go Girl Network. And they'd call the rest of us, and we'd go do it, right? When you're up there, you can lean a hand back, give a hand back, and help the rest of us up. When you're up there, you're helping to change the paradigm in the way men think about women in leadership. So we need to celebrate women who are advancing, and we need to count on them to help pull us up. And when you guys are advancing, you need to always be looking around at your Go Girl Network and be looking back and down and giving a hand to those who are coming up behind you. Because there is room at the top for all of us, and there's such a huge need at the top for all of us. So my hope for you all today is that you leave here jazzed and inspired and full of dreams and aspirations about what you want to accomplish, and know that you've gotten such great advice from such amazing leaders today about the ways to do that. So it's been great spending time with you all, and again, thank you for being here this afternoon.